I'm not going to be the first person or the last person to say this, but the Legend of Zelda franchise is big. Spanning more than 30 years, dozens of games, remakes of those games, as well as a manga, guidebooks, and art books, to completely experience everything that the series has to offer is an absolutely daunting task. On top of this scale and variety, the lore of the franchise is being debated and contended by fans of the series to this very day. Even a brief search on YouTube shows how many people have their own opinions of what they believe is the real timeline of the series. With so many different reincarnations of Link, Zelda, and whatever evil being they're battling across the hundreds of thousands of years of the actual scope of The Legend of Zelda, it's really only surpassed in scale by a handful of franchises. Why am I mentioning this? Well, simply put, to say how strong Link is not an easy question. Hello everyone, and welcome back to Lonk's Takes. With Tears of the Kingdom having just been released, I think it's a perfect time to talk about the general scaling of the Legend of Zelda franchise, and more importantly, its main character, Link. As there are many versions of Link, as well as pretty much every other character in the series, I will be discussing the important aspects of scaling for the franchise as a whole, before discussing how they can possibly connect back to the Link that we play as in both Breath of the Wild and now Tears of the Kingdom. Firstly, I want to address a common misconception. Like a lot of video games, and especially Nintendo games, the consistency of the game scaling doesn't always come off as very reasonable. One moment the villains are threatening to destroy the entire world, and the next moment the character is taking damage from chickens. While this may feel like a cop-out explanation, this is just a basic structure of game design. Pretty much every role-playing or adventure game is guilty of this at some point. Take another franchise, Pokemon for example. Even the weakest level 1 Pokemon can technically damage and even defeat Arceus, who is the essential god of the Pokemon franchise. There is an evident and obvious separation between the scaling within the lore and the situations created by necessary game mechanics. This video is concerned about the former. We care less about how technically big the explosions of Link's bombs are, like on Game Theory or something, and more so about what the actual lore says what these characters' capabilities are. To begin scaling the power of the Zelda franchise, we're going to start in a potentially unexpected place, Majora's Mask. In the Zelda series, there is a massive array of different alternate dimensions, worlds, or realms that Link goes through that are outside of Hyrule. These include, but are not limited to, Lorule, the Dark World, the Twilight Realm, Holodrum, Labrynna, Koholint, and the world of the Ocean King. We'll talk about the implications of these in a moment, but for now, we are concerned about the land that Link visits in Majora's Mask, Termina. Every single one of these realms are described using very similar and interchangeable terms like parallel worlds, lands, or realms. However, Termina is given a slightly different terminology compared to its alternative counterparts. As described in both the original Japanese of Hyrule Historia, as well as the direct guide materials relating to the game, Termina is an alternate universe. This tells us two things. One, that Termina itself is a universe, and two, that Hyrule is a universe, which is necessary for Termina to be an alternate of. Hyrule being a universe, and not just a reference to the kingdom itself, is supported by the origin story given in Ocarina of Time, which implies that literally nothing existed before Hyrule besides formless chaos, and in its entirety is considered what would become the land of Hyrule, rather than just like a portion of it. Knowing this, the main villain of Majora's Mask, the Skull Kid, is described to have warped the entire world and turned it into Termina, the universe that Link falls into at the beginning of the game. As mentioned in that same guide, the entire universe is being similarly tainted by the actions of the Skull Kid. However, this wouldn't be enough for Link to get a personal universal level scaling himself. However, two major things imply that he does actually scale to this. Firstly, and most obviously, he's able to beat Majora at the end of the game by himself, even without the Master Sword. Secondly, the same guidebook says that after Skull Kid is defeated, it is Link's own heart keeping the entire world in existence, and that him leaving it causes it to instantly disappear. This means that Link was passively keeping a universe in existence with essentially just his feelings. So, is this an outlier? Maybe this version of Link is just really unique version of the character, but when we're being pragmatic, this just isn't the case. Firstly, this is the same Link that appears in both Ocarina of Time as well as Twilight Princess in his arguably weakest form, let alone his adult form, which is just naturally should be stronger. Furthermore, I mentioned earlier about the existence of all those other realms that exist outside of Hyrule. Despite not being called universes themselves, they're almost directly stated to be the same size as Hyrule itself. Referring once again to the Zelda Encyclopedia, most of these realms are literally the inverse, shadow, or opposite of Hyrule, and thus by all means should be equivalent of its universal size. In several of these games, like Twilight Princess and Link to the Past, Ganon is capable of doing almost identical feats to Skullkid, warping the entire Sacred Realm after using the Triforce and fusing together Hyrule and the Twilight Realm even without the Triforce in his possession. Of course, just like Majora's Mask, Link is capable of defeating both versions of this Ganon. While there are other instances of creating universes, they don't necessarily scale to Link. The Windfish creates an entire universe in his dreams, a universe that the Zelda Wikipedia still considers a separate realm from Hyrule. The feat is still very ambiguous, but acts more of a supporting piece of evidence for characters within the Zelda franchise being able to create or affect universal-sized spaces in their entirety. Even if you don't accept these spaces as literal universes, many of these realms have at least celestial bodies within themselves outside of the actual land, with stars and a cycle of day and night. Bare minimum, if you don't want to accept the previous statements of them being universes, they would still be multi-solar system-sized realms. Once again, Majora's Mask is the most blatant with this, as aliens literally invade during a side quest, implying that Termina is larger than just a single country and has other solar systems with their own races of people. So, how can we connect this all back to Link within Tears of the Kingdom and Breath of the Wild? If these Links are separate people and have separate feats, it's not exactly possible to connect them to each other, right? Except there actually is. You see, there are essentially three things that should be most consistent across these games: Ganon, the Triforce, and the Master Sword. Despite there being multiple timelines and time periods, every time we see these three things, for the most part, it's the same one across the whole series. Every time Ganon is sealed and then comes back in some shape or form, unlike Link or Zelda, it's literally the same dude. Same goes for the Master Sword, or is being placed back in its pedestal for a future Link to find and wield in the future. For this last section, we're going to have some minor spoilers for Tears of the Kingdom. This is a mix of leaks and spoilers for the games that have come out, so what I say might be slightly wrong, but for the most part, I'm making, at worst, an educated guess. Cool? Cool. So, obviously, in Tears of the Kingdom, the Master Sword gets broken. I don't think anyone would be surprised by that, as it's literally in the trailers and on the cover of the game itself. We can assume that this was done by Ganon and probably his malice. Over the course of the game, the Master Sword gets reforged until Ganon is battled by the end of the game. This is very important, as this means that even before reviving fully, this version of Ganon is more powerful than any version we've seen previously. All previous versions of both Ganon and Ganondorf were capable of being damaged by the Master Sword, a weapon more powerful than anything young Link in Majora's Mask had access to, besides arguably the Fierce Deity's Mask. At least to me, using any fraction of his power to break the Master Sword implies that Ganon is stronger than ever before in the game. For Link to reforge the weapon and then have it be able to harm Ganon implies that the Master Sword itself is now stronger than it's ever been. In the past, the Master Sword has been reforged, and it's stated it literally makes Link more powerful as the sword grows stronger. So there is actually very consistent within the franchise that the Master Sword improves over time. This is also made even more impressive if Ganon has any new forms or boosts he demonstrates in the game beyond his basic Ganondorf form. Since Twilight Princess, it's really been implied more that the most powerful form of Ganon is this state, given how he's the last form you fight rather than just basic Ganon. This means that in Tears of the Kingdom, Link is likely fighting the most powerful version of Ganon, one that has already done multiple universal feats in the past and scales above other universal characters. Honestly, I think this makes sense. It's the first game. If the first game was about Link reaching his previous past strength and then coordinating with the past to defeat Ganon, then this game seems to be about Link developing even further past that level. So, while in the game itself, Link's feats aren't super impressive compared to previous Links, lore-wise, this might actually be the most powerful version of the Hero of Courage we've ever seen, and thus wields universe-destroying power. Not bad for a dude who can get beaten by some cuckoos. If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching. Even though I mostly make Dragon Ball videos, I am a huge fan of Legend of Zelda. Literally, the name of this channel is based off of Link's name, so this video was a lot of research, but really fun to make. Anyways, as always, if you disagree with my takes, let me know how I'm wrong in the comments down below. See ya!